Bom dia, queridos colegas, bom dia, queridas colegas. Estamos aqui no nosso último dia de evento e hoje temos, para começar a nossa manhã, a conferência do nosso querido professor Francisco Ordóñez. Todo mundo já conhece o Paco, né? Francisco ninguém conhece, todo mundo conhece o Paco, que é uma importante autoridade em sintaxe das línguas românicas, e vai falar hoje para a gente sobre as expresiones espaciales y posesión inalienable. Paco, muchísimas gracias por tu participación, por aceptar compartir con nosotros, ya que vienes trabajando con Sônia, e é um gosto receberte. Pessoal, hoje amanhã vai ser multilingüe, porque eu não falo inglês. O Paco vai fazer a conferência também em inglês. Com a conferência do Paco vai acontecer, não vai acontecer porque já aconteceu, eu vou resolver antes. Eu vou passar os slides do Paco, então eu já vou colocar para vocês no chat a lista de presença, porque eu não vou ter como colocar depois, durante a fala, porque eu vou estar reproduzindo os slides. Então, para não acontecer o problema que houve com a conferência da Mary, eu já estou compartilhando no chat a lista de presença para vocês assinarem, né? A lista de presença. Repetindo. E o link da próxima atividade. Bom, o link da atividade eu consigo colocar ao final, mas já está aqui o link da lista de presença. Então, passo a Paco, tienes la palabra, pues me quito y pues pongo las diapositivas. Solo te pido un segundo que me conecte por el móvil para ver la pantalla.
Ok, gracias. Muchas gracias, Carlos Felipe, por esta invitación. Y es un honor y un placer. I was going to say it in English. An honor. Thank you for the invitation. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here in this wonderful encuentro in homenaje of Sonia Sirina and Maria Eugenia Duarte. Both are very dear to me. I've known them for a long time, not as long as, since Romania Nova in the early 2000s. And I'm a big admirer of their contributions that have been done in the Brazilian Portuguese and all the wonderful work that they are doing and they continue doing. And it's always a pleasure to read and be with them. Sonia was in Stony Brook for a year, which was a wonderful experience in which we were able to collaborate in many things. So it is very nice to be here in this conference. So what I'm presenting today is, okay, I can see the share screens. Everybody can see more. So what I'm presenting today is work that I'm doing with Olga Fernández Soriano from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. And it's the question we're looking at the expression of possession in certain complex spatial expressions. I'm focusing mostly in Spanish and Catalan, and it would be interesting to see what happens in Brazilian Portuguese, but because Brazilian Portuguese at least doesn't hardly have any third-person clitics, I'm interested to see what happens with the second person. So let's, siguiente diapositiva. Okay, so the paradigm we are looking at is the following: is that you have a verb with a special expression like delante, al lado, detrás, and usually in most languages, that special expression is followed by the genitive, which is the ground of the special expression. So camina delante de María, camina al lado de María, or camina detrás de María. The interesting as the constructions that we're looking at, which is not widespread, but it appears in many Romance languages, is that genitive construction with the special expression also alternates with the dative construction that you find in the brown box. So le camina delante a María, le camina al lado a María, le camina detrás a María. That that dative that appears after the special expressions, is it either double or is left dislocated? I'm not going to get into it now. Siguiente. The same occurs in Catalan. So the Catalan is another language that allows the alternation between the genitive and the dative. Va davant de la Maria i li va davant a la Maria, or li va al costat a la Maria. Okay, so in both cases we have the dative clitic and the double thing. Okay, siguiente. Now, in other languages, this is not possible. You can imagine that possible in English you could have this alternation, but the alternation does not exist in English. So you can say she walks in front of Mary, but you cannot say she walks in front to Mary. And obviously, one might wonder why not. And obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that English doesn't have dative clitics. But you know, if that's not even a sufficient condition, if we look at other Romance languages might have dative clitics but don't have this. Siguiente. So the main points of the talk are the following. How is possible for special expressions to have dative in these languages? Special expressions in Romance can have the syntax, and we will see that they can have the special expressions. In the talk, I'm going to show that they have the syntax of possession structure as in nouns. So they are possessive structures. This possession structure shows many parallelisms with other so-called inalienable possession constructions that are found with datives in Romance. And we'll see the parallelism between inalienable possession constructions, also called possessor raising constructions. These are the two terms that it's used. And we will offer an analysis of these constructions based on the idea that there is an applicative head, but we will see that this is not just the applicative head that has been assumed before, but it's called what we will call a locative applicative head, following the steps of Acedo Matillán in Latin. Okay, siguiente. So what is inalienable possession? Inalienable possession are these constructions that appear in all languages and have different syntax depending on the language and depending on the construction we're looking at. So we'll start with English. Inalienable possession is when we in languages is that there are certain parts of the body, particularly in the body parts generally, but it can go beyond body parts that have a relation with the possessor, which is marked in a special way. So if you take a sentence like John hit Peter over the head, there is an inalienable possession relationship between the head and Peter, and that's marked by the use of this unusual use of the definite article. And the same is found in Spanish. Juan le pegó a Pedro en la cabeza. Okay. Siguiente. So that's a way to indicate inalienable possession. By here, the possessee is the head is the body part, and Peter is the possessor, and it's a co-index with it, and it somehow is marked with this definite article, which if you use the possessor, that there is not an implication of inalienable possession. And the same it can extend to beyond body parts, like you see an example like 7, Juan vio al hermano, and in that case, al hermano refers to Juan's brother. Siguiente. Now, the ones that this is one way to express inalienable possession in language with use of the definite article over those prepositions. Another way in which it's the one that have been widely studied in Romance language is the one we find in 8. In 8, you have ellos le vieron el diente al caballo. El caballo is the possessor. El diente is the thing that is possessed. It's a body part. and that relationship is indicated by the use of the definite article, el diente, and also by the use of the possessee. We see that the element that possesses the el diente is in dative. It's not a genitive or anything. It's in dative, and we know that is marking the idea that there is that dientes, tooth, belong to horses in a way that other things are not. And the same is found in 9. Ellos le examinaron la prótesis al herido. Prótesis, the prosthetic part, is part of the body. Or ellos le examinaron el ojo al herido. It's a body part, and it's the thing that is possesses the body, and then the al herido is marked with dative. In all these cases, you see that the dative appears in blue and is marked in front of the verb. Okay, so these are the previous ones involve subjects, objects, and this one involves datives, and this is the most well-known case of inalienable possession structures. Okay, siguiente. So the main point of the talk is the following: that the same relationship that we find between le tocaron el diente al herido, which is the inalienable possession constructions that we've seen so far, remember that at the beginning of the talk I said that there is these datives with these special expressions, or the point of the talk basically, and then we'll elaborate on that, is that those special expressions and the relationship that they have with the dative is exactly the same that we find with inalienable possession structures in 11. So le tocaron el diente al herido is the same relationship that when you have se le sentaron delante al herido. So al herido and delante forms a sort of inalienable location, we will call, and el diente al herido will be an inalienable possession. So there is nothing. So basically what these languages like Spanish and Catalan are doing is extending the inalienable possession structures that are well studied in 11 to locations. But that raises a lot of questions, like, front, tooth, we know it's a body part, but front is a spatial expression. So we're going to call that inalienable location. And we're going to see why we have reasons to think that dative in spatial expression is just an instantiation of possession. Siguiente. So basically, and then we see that the relationship that I get between the spatial expression and the dative in front and wounded person is the same as tooth, as wounded person, and that only happens when you have the dative. But when you use the dative, because you can say in front of someone, then the inalienable possession is not encoded. So remember that there is an alternation between dative with these spatial expressions and genitive. Genitive is found in all languages. Dative is only found in certain languages. And what we are saying is when you use the genitive, because you have the alternation of using the genitive, you're not marking this as an inalienable possession constructions. Siguiente. So now we can go to think about how we're going to prove this. And we know that I'm not going to get into the semantics on inalienable possession or inalienable location. It's a very intricate topic, but we intuitively know that in languages we mark these body parts being in a special possessor-possessee relation, and we pragmatically understand that it's contextually realized. So I'll give you an example in which how these semantics, special semantics, restricts the kind of datives that you can have. And I'm going to start with siguiente with the first example with an inalienable possession. So inalienable possession, as I said, is usually body parts, but it's not restricted to body parts. It could go beyond body parts. So for instance, in a case like le vieron, in example 16, le vieron el diente al herido, you take that the relationship between the tooth, which is a body part, and the herido, it's inalienable because tooth are attached to people. But it's clearly that it's very odd to say 15, like le vieron el coche al garaje, because the way the relationship between tooth and wounded people is not the same relationship that we find between cars and garage. You don't understand that. Usually, in the most pragmatic terms, you don't assume that there is an inalienable possession relationship between garage and cars. This also brings the question of whether animacy is a question or not, but we can discuss that. And that's a relationship that we see the contrast between 15 and 16 with the dative does not occur with the genitive. So, vieron el coche del garaje o vieron el diente del herido. It's all both perfectly fine, meaning el garage because the genitive is not encoded in inalienable possession. So the question is now how is the syntax encoding that inalienable possession? Next. Siguiente. Okay. So we saw before how garage and in inalienable possession construction is not in inalienable possessions, garages and cars usually don't allow these kind of expressions with the dative. Now we're going to do that with the special expression. So we found that there is the same contrast with this. We saw garages and tooth and the with nominal, and now we are going to do this with special, and we found the same contrast. So you say al herido se le sentó delante, meaning se le sentó delante al herido, but you cannot say a la casa se le sentó delante. So there is a contrast between, we understand that the relationship between in front and wounded people is different from the relationship between in front and houses. I mean, houses have fronts and wounded people have fronts too, but it's obviously that you can express that with the dative in Spanish in the cases of wounded people, but not with houses. A la casa se le sentó delante, unless it's very strange. But in these constructions, the genitive is perfectly fine with both of that. So 21 and 22 are perfectly, se le sentó delante del herido, se sentó delante de la casa. So these contrasts that you find 19 and 20, ¿puedes enseñar la previa? And the one that you find with coches and garages, you see that it's parallel. There is a parallelism here between the restrictions on animacy and the and dative versus genitive. Siguiente. Okay. Here I give other examples, like el gato le cayó encima al estudiante. That's perfectly fine. Encima estudiante. But no, you cannot say el gato le cayó encima a la mesa. Kind of weird. And with the genitive, they're fine. El gato cayó encima del estudiante, el gato cayó encima de la mesa. Siguiente. So far it looks like the inalienable location exists. It has not really been the focus of the study of anybody. That's why we're looking at them now. So there are these questions that pop up about this construction. Have special terms, have a special syntax when referring to inanimate or integral parts of things. That special syntax is manifested with the dative possession. So the questions that we're going to look at is which special terms allow this special syntax? What is the similarity between special terms and body parts, fundamentally? Why these special terms seem to be behaving like body parts? And is this inalienable meaning only allowed with the dative special syntax? Are there other constructions in which special expressions might have that? Siguiente. So the special expressions that are now this inalienable syntax are various, and I'm just going to look at the general property of them. The first special expressions that allow these special kind of inalienable location semantics and syntax, first of all, are spatial relational nouns of the structure that you find in many languages, in which you have structure, in which you have a preposition, and then you have a determiner, and then you have a noun that indicates location, and then you have and it continues, al lado de, al costado de, next to in other languages. And these are special expressions that have a very complex structure, so are complex special expressions, that they are special, and they have the following properties. Here I'm following the lines of study of these special expressions made in the cartographic work in recent years. And they do have these more complex, they allow measure phrases like 2 metros a la izquierda de Juan. They allow locative aquí a la izquierda de Juan, like in 28. Siguiente. And obviously, which is the point of our talk, is they allow for the dative. A Juan se le puso al lado, al Joan li va anar al costat. Okay. Siguiente. The second elements that allow this dative is what we call axial parts. I'm using the terminology by Svenonius. And these don't have any determiner or obvious determiner or prepositions. These are complex prepositions, adverbial prepositions you see in traditional grammars. And there are terms that indicate space, like detrás, delante, cerca, and they can be, there might be some prepositional term inside them, but it's very complex. Example. So indicate location, basically, and these are the ones. And they are very similar to the relational nouns, location relational nouns, only that they lack a determiner or a preposition. And they have measure phrases, like in 31, and they allow locative. Siguiente. And they allow, obviously, the dative. A Juan se le puso delante, al Joan se le va puso al costat. Okay, siguiente. Okay, those are the most important special expressions that allow these constructions. There are other things like, I just, for the sake of completeness, I put here other elements or prepositional elements like tras, bajo, ante, which were studied by Fraga 2020 in a very nice paper, which came out in Isogloss. And these elements, I'm not going to talk about them, but they're not necessarily spatial, and they are not, and they are more like prepositions, more like the axial parts. Actually, the thing about the axial part is that they have a nouny part in them that you don't have in this question in tras and ante. Siguiente, I'm not gonna look at them. They don't allow genitives, tras de la lucha o ante del peligro. They don't allow measure phrases, 2 metros ante el monumento. Y they don't obviously allow the dativization. A Juan se le puso tras. Those are impossible constructions. So these tras, bajo, antes, as you can see, these tras and bajo and antes are part of the axial part that you saw before. So tras is not spatial, but detrás is spatial. Bajo is not spatial, but debajo is. And antes is not spatial, but you assume that delante is related to antes, then that's spatial. So there is all this interesting, and it has been studied by Fábregas too. Okay, next. Siguiente. Another other expressions, not all things that indicate space allow these constructions. So next to, for some reason, which is junto a, does not. So you cannot say, first of all, it doesn't allow genitive, junto de la casa, and it's a special thing. So junto a alguien, estoy junto a alguien. But it doesn't allow genitive, doesn't allow measure phrases, 2 metros junto al monumento, and it doesn't allow dativization. So those things seem to go together. So if you allow genitive, so even if you're a spatial, you might not necessarily have this thing. So 2 metros junto al monumento, a Juan se le puso junto, impossible. Okay, so those are cases in which a spatial thing for some reason. And now we're going to look at why. What is the difference between junto a versus detrás or versus al lado de? Okay, siguiente. And then there are things that are not necessarily spatial, which is very interesting, that do seem to allow this inalienable location expression. So, and the ones that I'm looking at is en contra de y a favor de. And And they're interesting because they allow the genitive, so en contra del candidato, a favor del candidato, and they allow the dativization. Al candidato le votaron en contra, al candidato le votaron a favor. Siguiente. And one of the things that, at least I'm not saying that all varieties of Spanish have that, but at least my variety does, they allowed post-possessive, post-nominal possessives. So, en contra suyo, en contra mío, a favor suyo, a favor mío. And then, okay, they might not have measure phrases in the terms of spatial measure phrases, but they have some sort of measure phrases when you count votes. So you say, el candidato sacó 100 votos en contra, el candidato sacó 100 votos a favor. So those are measures, some type of measure. Siguiente. Okay. So en contra and favor are not necessarily special, but they do seem to behave like that. And we are thinking that the way to think about this is that they are really, they seems to be form integral relationships with people. So en contra and favor seems to be form part of the air around your body. So you say, you have expressions like viento en contra o viento a favor. Could we think of them as the same terms? And I think it's good to think, it's possible to think about it in the same terms. Siguiente. Okay, so the quadrant elements allow the dative construction. We saw some spatial expressions do not, like a junto, and some others which are not special allow it, like en contra and favor. But one of the things that we saw that they have, all these expressions have in common is, first of all, they allow genitives. So al lado de, delante de, a favor de, en contra de, versus junto, you don't say junto de. They can allow possession, al lado mío, delante mío, a favor mío, enfrente mío, a favor mío. And they allow some type of measure, either in meters or in terms of votes, in the cases of 2 metros, 100 votos a favor. Siguiente. Now, so we see all the areas where we have the inalienable location structures. Now, can we think of that inalienable location found in other parts of the, which does not involve datives, because we are focusing on datives? We see that in some cases that the inalienable possession is relation between the dative and the location, which is delante detrás. And now we are going to look at other cases in which the possessor is not a dative. Just to give you an area, for instance, you can find that in examples like Juan se meó encima. We have to go to these body functions in these constructions. So Juan is encima is obviously is part of Juan, and Juan is not a dative; it's a subject. Okay. And in a way, you could say that Juan le meó encima a Pedro. In that case, a Pedro is the dative. So you can have an alternation between dative and subject. Juan se meó encima versus Juan le meó encima a Pedro. And that inalienable effect that you find in 45 or 46, you don't find with the genitive, like Juan meó encima de Pedro. But the interesting is 45, where it's the subject and not the dative, which is, we find these inalienable possession constructions. Siguiente. And the same that we saw that Juan se meó encima, with encima being the location, the location. We alternate with body parts, which is very nice. So Juan se rascó en la cabeza, o Juan se meó en las manos, o se meó en los pantalones. Those, when you say those constructions, you're assuming that the relationship between the pants and Juan is the same as the one that you find with encima. Juan rascó la cabeza de María. So these are very examples of all those. So we have these constructions. We're going to look at that, but I just want to say that this inalienable location extends beyond datives. It goes to subjects in this case. Siguiente. Other cases in which possession expressed in these spatial expressions has some sort of inalienable location is found with possessors. And I know that in the Romance languages, except for the rational nouns, which you have a possessive, like a mi lado, a su lado, there is these possessors that can appear after the special expression that is found in many dialects of Spanish. And I don't think it's possible in Portuguese, but anyway. And then what we see is like when you say these possessors that appear after the location expression and it appears in, it's the same, you have a special relationship. So you can say in Catalan, en Joan viu darrere del professor, which is the ground, but you could say en Joan viu darrere seu, possessor with you, detrás suyo. And we think that the detrás suyo, when you say suyo, the relationship between detrás and suyo is somehow inalienable as opposed to not the genitive. Siguiente. So, and that you can find because I think in Catalan it's pretty clear that there is a contrast between under suyo, detrás suyo versus detrás suyo. For me and for some other speakers that I asked to, it usually is restrictive to humans. So the boy walks under, if you say that you are talking about a professor and you have a little baby, he walks under the professor, you can say the boy walks under his. But if you're talking about a bridge, which is perfectly possible, and you say the boy walks under the bridge, seu, meaning using the third person plural, third person possessive, that's not possible. So nin pasa per sota seu, so as the bridge. So in some, there is a contrast, at least for many speakers. So this is another case in which the inalienable location semantics seems to be extended with post-nominal possessives. Siguiente. In Spanish, the same. So if you're talking about a teacher, el niño pasa debajo suyo, I assume that the boy is going under his legs. El niño pasa debajo suyo. You're talking about a professor, but you don't talk about that as a bridge. You say, el niño pasa debajo suyo, meaning debajo del leg. It's kind of odd to me. So there's a difference between animacy between teachers and bridge. But again, it's more than animacy. I think it has to be contextualized pragmatically. Siguiente. And the same with pre-nominal with the relational nouns. I'm not going to. So you have the teacher, el niño pasa a su izquierda. You're talking about a teacher is good, but el niño pasa a su izquierda, talking about the bridge, it's not good. Siguiente. So what do you do with bridges? Well, because bridges don't like these post-nominal possessive with special expressions, and you don't like them with this. What you do with bridges, basically, is either in Spanish, you don't say anything. You say, el niño pasa debajo, and it's contextually assumed like a null object in a language like Brazilian Portuguese. You just assume that there's a null object there. El niño pasa debajo, you're talking about the bridge. And in Catalan, what you do is you use the locative clitic, like in 35p. El niño, el nen y pasa per sota. Next. Siguiente. So the inalienable location extends to datives, the ones we've seen, reflexives, and postnominal possessive with special expression, and prenominal possessive with postnominal possessive. We are going to focus on the datives, but you see that the inalienable location seems to be going beyond the cases of datives. Siguiente. So why are these special expressions? Why are they having? They seem that special expressions in these constructions are interpreted as body parts. So that's what we assume. That when you say on top, which could, generally out of context could be anything, on top. Here, when we have these uses, on top means really the head. And in this nice picture, you see the part how it shouldn't say arriba, it says encima is the head, detrás is the back. Okay, so we reference these expressions as body parts, basically. As somehow in this context, we take these expressions to be something referring to the body. El encima is the top, el encima is the top of the head. So this is the parallelism between 38 and 9. When we say on top, we say we are really referring to the head or something on top of us. Siguiente. Or something related to us. So dice, vive detrás suyo is really where we are saying that in Spanish, we are saying that it's behind his house. Or va detrás suyo means that he's really going behind this person, or that it's really behind his car. So detrás and detrás, these behind expressions are interpreted as referred to human space. It's human space. For some reason, detrás out of this context could be anything, but detrás in this expression is human space, however you want to define that. Siguiente. So what we're going to do then, if this behind or top are interpreted as human space, on top being in the head or the back being the back, the back being the behind being the back. So we're going to just extend the possessor. So the inalienable possession constructions were analyzed. The analysis that has been assumed in the literature is the analysis of possessor racing. So basically, this possessor racing analysis of this inalienable possession structure assumes that the element and the possessor leaves the expression and moves up to the verb. Okay, that's why it's called possessor racing. This expression, and it starts to be part of the argument structure of the verb. So Juan le pisé en el pie, which is a body part. You have the a Juan, which would be the dative, and le pisé en el pie, which is the possessor racing. And that's the possessor racing construction. And the parallel we find in Inforion, a Juan le caí encima, basically would be encima would be like el pie, as a human space, and then the dative is what belongs to that human space, which is Juan. Siguiente. Now, what is the analysis? There has been a lot of analysis of possessor racing in constructions, and Dale has a wonderful paper in which talks about all of them. We're going to move close to the analysis provided by Landau, 1999, but we are going to apply it, instead of applying it to possessor racing, we're going to apply it to space, okay, which has not been looked at. This space expression have not been looked at from this perspective. And we're going to assume a little bit of the analysis by Cuervo, but we'll see that it's not exactly the dative that Cuervo is analyzing. There are different types of applicatives that Cuervo looks at, but this is a special one, and she doesn't look at it in the, but we are going to see how it works. Siguiente. So these datives have the following peculiarities. It's locations as opposed to body parts. They have an applicative head, which is realized as dative. And there is fundamentally this that is different from other datives. There is always an alternation between genitive and dative. So there is the genitive, delante de, which is not implied inalienable location, and the dative that implies inalienable location. And there is affectness. Okay, affectness is a very difficult it's a semantic intuition that we have, that it's somehow when you have the dative, you think that the subject is affected. So, le cayó encima a Juan is affected, cayó encima de Juan is not, the affectedness is not encoded in the same way. Or me encima it's understood as more affected than me encima de mí, I guess, but if you can say that. I don't think you can say that. No, forget. Okay, siguiente. So the analysis that we're using is the applicative. So what we have is the applicative racing constructions. First, we're going to look at dative possessive construction, and then we're going to the inalienable possession, and then an inalienable location. So a Juan, the typical example, al caballo Juan le quitó el diente. So we would have a construction in these three, as you say, the tooth and the horse. And then you have an applicative head that introduced that construction, the tooth, the horse. And that applicative head is the one that introduced that. And siguiente. Then there is movement of the possessum, the horse, to the applicative specifier. Siguiente. And there is a derivational history. So you start with both constructions, and then you move these possessive, and you move it to this applicative head, and then you continue with the derivation. So that explains the alternation between genitive and dative. The source of affectness assumed with cuervo is going to be the applicative head, and then we're going to change the analysis, because instead of being possessive structure, we are going to say these are locations. So this is the addition that we have. Siguiente. So we have, instead of having a noun phrase, we have a locative phrase. So you have the special expression on top, and then you have the other element, the horse. So here we're moving to these constructions. Se le sentó encima. So you have on top and the horse. However you interpret on top as a something in the spatial area of a horse. Siguiente. You move the horse, y that's how you obtain se le sentó encima al caballo, okay? Versus se sentó encima del caballo. So this would be the analysis that we are analyzing. Siguiente. So what are the evidence that we can show that this possessor raising analysis for these locations is in the right track? I think that there are certain direct and indirect evidence that show that this analysis is the right track. One of them has to do with the fact that by proposing applicative heads, and the analysis of applicative heads have shown that one of the properties that they have is that applicative heads have this possibility of increasing the valency of the verbs. So you add an argument by introducing this abstract applicative head, and this is what we're saying. So these location expressions can be introduced by this abstract applicative head that increase the location. So let's take an expression, a verb that like poner, puso el libro en la mesa, which, remember, these are two complements, a location complement and an object complement. We know that this verb poner takes two complements, the object and the location, and you can use that with an special expression. So puso el libro delante. Perfectly fine. Okay, siguiente. So what we do, the interesting thing is when we introduce the inalienable location structure, we are introducing another complement. So we introduce three arguments, which is very interesting. So when you say puso el libro delante, you only have two arguments. But when you say a Juan le puso el libro delante, you definitely are introducing the book in front, and then you're introducing another increasing of the Juan. And the same can be shown in English, in Catalan, where there is an increasing of the valency when you have the dative, al Joan li posa el llibre al davant, but you don't have it when you have the locative, like y posa el llibre al davant. So you're increasing the puso el libro, and this is a case of three complements, like el libro delante a Juan. Okay. Siguiente. And evidence from this increasing of the valency, indirect evidence or evidence that they are increasing of the valency of one more argument, comes to the fact that these datives, we know that these datives that we introduce in these constructions are subject to the Meului constraint. And we know that Meului constraint, which is the impossibility in many languages of having an accusative first, second person with a dative third person in the clitic system, that element that we're introducing in these constructions is also subject to that, which really indicates probably that these are arguments of these verbs. So you could say, example 53, me puso delante de Juan with the genitive, but you cannot say me would be the object le puso delante a Juan. Okay, so you would have me object, he puts me in front. So you have 1, 2, and 3, and then me le puso delante a Juan. It's impossible. Versus me puso delante a Juan. This seems to be a good evidence that this dative is part of the argument, and then it shows that it's part of the argument structure that we are having. The increment that something like an applicative head seems to be introduced in these datives here with locations. Siguiente. Another evidence that shows that, probably this evidence indicates that these datives, that they move up into the verbal, when they move out and they go to the applicative head and move up to the verb, they can form in that new, when they move out, they can form what we can call idiomatic meanings. So, and there are many nice expressions in Spanish which only with this inalienable location get that special meaning. So, le puso la mano encima. So you have la mano encima the location. That it has in Spanish an idiomatic meaning he hit, or he or she hit him or her. Okay. Poner la mano encima de alguien, a alguien, le pongo la mano encima indicates that you're hitting someone. O le echó mierda encima, meaning to criticize someone. O quitarle un peso de encima, meaning to relieve someone. So all these, you see how these expressions are used with these elements to indicate special. So there is some idiomatic meaning that comes out of the moving to this applicative head. Puso la mano encima de alguien does not have that meaning with the genitive, but it does have the meaning with the. It doesn't have that meaning with the genitive. So puso la mano encima de alguien, it's fine, but le puso la mano encima, it just means hit. O echó mierda encima de alguien, it could be the literal meaning, de echar mierda on top of someone, but le echó mierda encima, it's the idiomatic meaning. Siguiente. And then we have also with locations with body parts. So, alguien le puso la miel en los labios, meaning to tempt someone. Le puse la miel en los labios de alguien, that's okay, but the idiomatic meaning only appears in 50O when le puso la miel en los labios. Siguiente. And in Spanish, in Catalan, you see this difference between the possibilities of idiomatic and not idiomatic is because you use different clitics. So, li va darrere, he goes behind someone, it has all the idiomatic meaning with the dative clitic, but not with iba darrere. Does not have that special meaning that you find. Siguiente. Now, we see locations is the one thing that we are seeing that takes the applicative head seems to have a complement of location. And we predict that other things that are no locations should not be able to, even if they have a prepositional thing, should not be able to appear there. And that's exactly what we show, that if you have a special expression that indicates goal, then the things don't work. So if you have to direct to the side or navigate under someone, which is possible, fine, you might not use the dative in these constructions, because we take that under or to the side are not locations, but they are goals. Okay, so that's why 64 and 65 are not good. Siguiente. And the same, this is the same point, but with other goals. So se le dirige hacia el lado, le navegó hacia debajo, le resbaló hacia adelante, impossible because they are goals. Siguiente. So goals are not permitted, but the kind of locations that permit these constructions can be embedded under paths. So you could say that it could be more complex. So you could say a Juan le pasó por al lado, o le sacó el clavo de dentro, those are perfectly fine, because we would assume in those constructions that they have more structure in it, like path and location. Siguiente. And this is the analysis that we'd propose. So it would be a path phrase, we would be embedding a locative phrase, and you could move the element above, and I would move to the specifier of the applicative head. Siguiente. And then, and these are interesting examples, you can embed that location into a body part. So you can say, al niño el libro le cayó encima de la cabeza. You would have on top and the head. Or al niño le escupieron detrás de la oreja. So in both cases, you have the special location, encima, and the body part. So these are cases, very interesting cases, in which you have a recursion of body locations, la oreja and detrás and on top and of the head. Okay. Siguiente. So it could be very complex, the kind of structure that we are assuming here. And here's the analysis, okay? And siguiente. Yes, this is the analysis, okay. So I think the next question, I'm going to go fast because I think I'm running out of time. That the next question is, what kind of verbs allow these locations, and what if there is any restriction on the kind of verbs? And it's very hard to pinpoint what kind of restrictions we have on the kind of verbs that allow that. We know that verbs like estar do not meet these constructions. Está enfrente de mí, me está enfrente, o está situado debajo de mí, te está situado debajo. It's very hard. But similar verbs like quedar, which is similar to estar, allow that. So queda enfrente de Juan, a Juan le queda enfrente. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at. What kind of verbs? Why is estar not allowing this, and why quedar does? Siguiente. We try all sorts of verbs, and here is you say it is permitted with eventive verb that involves location, like caer, llegar, bailar, sentarse, arrodillar, reír, llorar. So you can have them poner, colgar. So these are all the different. But the question should be further explored. But it seems that it's not very restrictive. It seems to be pretty open. Maybe there is an eventive part in this verbal head that allows that. Yes, siguiente. But it has to be body center, yeah. So we assume that if there is any restriction on the verb, can be encoded by the fact that the abstract locative head incorporates to the verb in order to, and that verb has to have certain properties. That's our idea here. That's how to understand the restrictions on the verb. Siguiente. And this is inspired by the analysis that Acedo Matellán has about Latin, where in Latin, he's talking about in certain circumstances, the locative non-directional preposition is incorporated into the verb. So in Latin, what you have is the constructions like, I guided the man to you, the dative to you appears in the dative, obviously, and the element that supposedly is responsible for the dative is incorporated and with the preposition at. Here in Spanish, we don't have any clear cases of incorporation. Siguiente. Well, this is the same point, but with another construction in Latin. Okay. Siguiente. There is no incorporation unless you want to say that the clitic is the kind of incorporation that we are looking at. So te pusieron el libro detrás. The spatial part, contrary to Latin, which is behind or in front, is not incorporated because it can appear between it appears after the object. Me colgaron el collar delante o te pusieron el libro detrás. It appears after the object. So if there is an incorporation, it cannot be the Latin incorporation of the prepositional term, but it has to be the clitic itself, which is a possibility. Siguiente. So, okay, I'm going to skip this because I'm running out of time. This is just basically going on what the analysis of spatial relations should be in order, and how they are using the basically inspire ourselves to the analysis of Burns in 2005 in this possessor construction. Siguiente. So I'm going to skip that. Yes, siguiente. Siguiente. Well, there is an interesting thing about here in this, which I just want to mention in Spanish, which is those dialogues that allow the post-location possessive and delante mío. There is an interesting variation in dialects that the ones that allow mío, sometimes they allow the feminine. So you could say Juan está delante mío, or you can say Juan está delante mía. So there are certain varieties of Spanish that allow that feminine. And we were wondering, well, what is the feminine due to? Why would people say feminine? It has to do with the ground being feminine, and we just saw that it was there is nothing to have to do with the ground. Sometimes people use the masculine gender, and some people use the feminine gender, which is very. And what is that telling us, really? That obviously, delante mío, delante mía, is that the nominal part that is requiring the gender is that some people are interpreted delante as masculine and some people are interpreted delante as feminine. That's the only reason we are that the gender is coming from delante. Some people think that delante is masculine, or in there, and they don't think they assume in their lexicon that delante is masculine, and that some people think assume that delante is feminine. Delante mío, delante mía. Siguiente. And then the question comes, siguiente. So one interesting question that we wanted to check is whether it was possible to use the inalienable location construction with dative at the same time you use the post-nominal, the post-location dative. And to our amazement, he said, yes, you can do it. It doesn't sound that bad. So a Juan se le subió delante suyo. It sounds redundant, but it's not terrible. As opposed to se le subió delante de él, which indicates that these two things, the post-nominal, post-location possessive, and the dative, can co-occur. Siguiente. And the same in Catalan. Yeah. Siguiente. So conclusions. Possession with complex expression has different manifestations. One of them is with the possessive determinants with relational nouns. A mi izquierda, a la izquierda de Juan. Postnominal possessives that are found in many dialects of Spanish, delante mío versus delante mía. And then the one that we're more looking at is the possessor raising, which is se le subió delante. Siguiente. The possessor raising analysis that we're proposing for locations explains why dative clitics is obligatory, why there is affectation in these cases, there is inalienable semantics, allow idiomatic interpretations, allows can yield Malloy restrictions, there is the increment of valency, and the semantic nature is fundamental. That incorporation is only possible with certain verbal types. Siguiente. And obviously, this work needs to be extended to other Romance languages. And obviously, one of cases would be Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese, the difference. Another interesting case is what happens in Italian, which in some of these cases, they use the a instead of the d with a genitive. And I have some ideas about that, but if someone asks, I can talk about it. And this is, I guess this is all. We are looking at the incorporation of the resulting outcome. And thank you for listening to me. Thanks, Carlos. This is the bibliography. Yeah, it's the selected reference. Yeah. Thank you.
Hola, Paco. Muchísimas gracias.
De nada, de nada.
Bueno, bom, queridos colegas, temos poucos minutos, temos 5 minutos para não atrasar a próxima atividade. Então, se alguém tiver alguma pergunta, por favor, pode colocar no chat. Paco, Sônia disse... Great talk, Paco. Interesting and to me data illuminating analysis.
Thank you, Sonia. I love to see what happens in Brazilian Portuguese with this.
Javier Villalba, pues, dice Nice talk, Paco. Merci.
Muchas gracias, Xavier.
Cida Torres.
Sida. Okay, Sida work on dative, so she probably is the possessive construction. So she probably have something to say about what it looks like in Brazilian Portuguese, I guess. Yeah.
Jairo igualmente dice great talk.
Oh, Jairo, thank you. Muito obrigado.
Eloísa Sales dice, there is an old paper by Lucia Lobato on complex prepositions. The role of the duma prepositional is crucial.
Oh, okay. What did you mean with dummy preposition? The dummy would be the genitive there, or I don't know. Okay, I'll look at it. Can you send me? I'll email you and I'll ask for the reference. I think in Brazilian, in Portuguese, the different one of the I started looking at it, and one of the differences is that instead of delante, you have adiante, no, with the preposition a, right?
Responde que sí.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know whether that makes a difference. And there is a variation in dialects of Spanish, and not all of them allow delante. Some of them they say adelante, and that could make. I thought at the beginning that it would make a difference whether you use a dative or not, but it is an interesting issue here.
Cida dice, pues, que fomentó muchas reflexiones sobre los posesivos en Brazilian Portuguese. Y María Eugenia dice que desgraciadamente no tenemos dativos.
Sí, pero con los de primera y segunda, the first and the second person, it could be me caiu de anchi, can you say? I don't know. Can you say that? But yes, the fact that there are no third-person dative clitics makes it a more complicated. I mean, it could be interesting to look in European Portuguese because there we have these dative ones. I asked in European Portuguese in Facebook.
Eugenia dice, pues, ele sentou na frente e atrás.
Ah, okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sônia comenta, pues, me caiu em cima.
Ah, okay. So you have that, me cayó encima. Yeah. Okay. But you don't have le cayó encima. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Y can you say me puso el libro encima? Me colocó el libro encima.
Botou. Para mí, botou.
O me botó el libro encima. Yeah. Okay. No te oigo.
Para mí, pues, ele me colocou o livro em cima, pero no es encima de mí, pero en otro lugar, ¿no?
Ah, okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Eloísa sigue. Very important for applicative analysis, the presence of the genitive with the dative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y Cida, sí, con la pérdida de la posesión externa dativa de tercera persona en portugués brasileño, otras estrategias muy interesantes se desarrollaron. Pues,
Yeah.
Pero Cida se está preguntando si incluso habrá alguna relación con la construcción de tópico sujeto.
Yeah. No sé. That's very interesting, but no.
Renato Lacerda dice, complex spatial preposition is usually where you find a peace trend in romance. Any correlation there, Paco? Potential for on-file analysis?
Yeah, that's interesting. That these sort of special expressions are in some ways nouny, and yeah, I haven't explored this question of preposition stranding with these cases, but I think that Thank you, Renato. That's a very good point. We'll think about that, definitely. Hello?
Okay.
Okay, gracias.
Bueno.
Thank you for all the comments, questions. It was wonderful. It's been my second week of classes here in person, so it's been complicated to be there. But thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Sonia and Maria Eugenia,
Paco, muchísimas gracias por tu presentación. Es un gusto irte siempre y recibirte en Brasil. Bueno, espero que podamos hacer otro evento acá en Bahía y tenerte con nosotros otra vez.
Encantado. Gracias, Carlos.
Queridos colegas, então a gente encerra por aqui a conferência do professor Francisco Ordóñez. E já coloquei no chat a lista de presença e vou repetir agora o link para as próximas comunicações que começarão às 10h20, ok? Então, até a próxima sala. Gracias, Paco. Hasta luego.
Gracias, hasta luego.